So, after looking at some Onion articles, I've come to the realization that it's impossible to parody conservatives. Hey there all you gals, gents, and peeps, this is Axolotl Aristotle. I've made this video to share with you all why I think conservatism itself is just a big joke. This isn't going to be a video that focuses on random conservative voters saying insane stuff. One, because the far-right MAGA Republican base is just a part of the Conservative Party, and two, that's just scraping the bottom of the barrel. Instead, this video is going to be showing that even when conservatism tries to take itself seriously, all it does is turn parody into reality. If you're a conservative watching this, and I know there will be a few, this video might not be for you. But if you stick around, you might gain some perspective on what the right wing has to offer you, and spoilers, it's not much. But before we delve into the meat of this video though, I think it's important to define what parody is. The simplest way I can describe it is basically pretending to be a person or party and over-exaggerating them for comedy. Parodies and satires have been used in politics for hundreds of years, from the 18th century essay A Moderate Proposal, which critiqued the view that citizens of a nation were commodities by suggesting that young children who were unable to work could instead be fed to the workers, all the way to Jojo Rabbit, a hilarious movie that ruthlessly mocks Nazi ideology at every corner. Speaking of Jojo Rabbit, there's a scene I want to discuss to prove why satire of modern conservatism is impossible. The main character, Jojo, is at the SS equivalent of a Boy Scout camp and is learning about Jewish people. There's a crude stereotype of a Jewish person drawn on the chalkboard as the instructor asserts that the Aryan race is the greatest, most intelligent race there is, right before pivoting to say, in a very sing-song voice, "Alright kids, let's go burn some books." This seems funny and ridiculous, right? Well, guess what? Stuff like this is still happening now. See, I chose this example specifically because when most people think of book burnings and book bannings, especially in regard to books that focus on a minority group, the immediate comparison is, that's what the Nazis did, and the action is bad and evil. But modern conservatism revels in banning books on people and subjects they don't like. Florida is the perfect example of this. Entire school libraries got rid of all their books, in fear of being persecuted by Governor Ron DeSantis' anti-woke law. A teacher is being investigated for showing the class a Disney movie with a gay character. A Disney movie! A movie that was made specifically to be watched and enjoyed by children. Not adults, children. And also giving the ability for just one bigoted parent to instigate a book ban hearing for any reason whatsoever, just to name a few examples. And before someone says it's to keep porn out of schools, that was already a law in Florida. Now, a parody on this would obviously involve comparing conservative book bans to Nazi book burnings, except conservatives have already been doing those too. Meet Greg Locke, a far-right pastor, avid Trump supporter, and COVID-19 denier.
Are you telling me my kid's possessed?
No, I'm telling you, your kid could be demonized and attacked, but your doctor calls it autism.
Back in 2022, Locke held a massive book burning of anything he deemed to be demonic, which included random fantasy books of all kinds as well for being witchcraft. Sorry JK, I guess being super transphobic won't save your books from the pyre. A tweet by Yoranon News sums up conservative book bannings perfectly. Book burnings then versus book burnings now. It's not a joke, it's not a parody, it's simply calling a spade a spade. Now I recognize that this sounds like hyperbole. After all, the one major book burning was done by some wacky pastor, not a politician, not the party at large. Even if the actions of conservative book bannings in Florida and all across the country is alarming, it doesn't necessarily mean that the main party at large has developed into fascistic Nazis. But sadly, the GOP is the party that is adjacent to and has many far-right Nazi constituents. It's actually kind of crazy how cons went from saying Nazism is bad a few years ago to saying that any Nazi that does something now is actually a psyop by the government to make cons look bad. I don't know, if your fear is that the average person associates Nazi behavior with your political party, it's probably your political party. But just in case the book bannings wasn't enough to convince you, let's quickly look at some more evidence. You have popular pundits calling themselves fascists, repeatedly, and not as a joke. Republican representatives like Lauren Boebert tweeting that fighting against hatred and anti-Semitism is a conspiracy to target conservatives. Literally calling themselves domestic terrorists at CPAC, a legitimate and large Republican convention, and people like Republican Representative Tommy Tuberville from Alabama defending white nationalists in the military because they're just Americans, I guess.
We're showing our adversaries we're weak. All we got to do is go back and look at Joe Biden's, what he's done to our military with the woke ideas, with the CRT that we're teaching in our military. We are losing in the military so fast, our readiness in terms of recruitment. And why? I can tell you why. Because the Democrats are attacking our military, saying we need to get out the white extremists, the white nationalists, people that don't believe in our agenda as Joe Biden agenda. They're destroying it.
You mentioned the Biden administration trying to prevent white nationalists from being in the military. Do you believe they should allow white nationalists in the military?
Well, they call them that. I call them Americans.
And then, when the Allen, Texas shooting happened, conservatives were quick to claim that the white supremacist shooter with SS and right-wing Death Watch tattoos, who watched Tim Pool and made transphobic tweets that he said were inspired by libs of TikTok, was, at the very least, not conservative, but at most was a government psyop to make conservatives look bad. Conservatives believe that an actual Nazi that listens to conservative pundits wasn't a Nazi, and those that don't are just lying. Insane shit. Now, up until this point, I was kind of just making the direct comparison to the GOP and the Nazis. While that's all well and good, because fuck Nazis, I want to structure the remainder of this video around a CBS poll from 2023, because like a car crash, I can't help but stare at it. In the poll, GOP primary voters listed what they were most interested in from their politicians. 85% want to challenge woke ideas. 66% oppose any gun regulations. 61% want someone who supports the idea that Trump won in 2020. And best for last here, 57% are looking for someone or something to make liberals angry. That last part is extremely important, and I want you to keep it in the back of your mind. Anyways, regarding the woke things first. One of their leading intellectuals on woke, Bethany Mandel, couldn't even define it when asked to do so on television, even though she wrote an entire book on the subject.
You know, when we talk about traditional,
what does that mean to you? Would you mind defining woke? Because it's come up a couple times, and I just want to make sure we're on the same page.
So, I mean, woke is sort of the idea that this is going to be one of those moments that goes viral. I mean, woke is something that's very hard to define, and we've spent an entire chapter defining it. It is sort of the understanding that we need to totally reimagine and redo society in order to create hierarchies of oppression. It's hard to explain in a 15-second soundbite.
Yeah, look, your time.
So I guess it's up to me. Woke. Adjective. Anything conservatives don't like, which as this video will show, would be LGBTQ people, non-white people, and non-Christians.
It's hard to explain in a 15-second soundbite.
Just look at this tweet by Christina Pushow, the former spokesperson and current campaign staffer of Ron DeSantis. Look at how happy she is that queer people are fleeing for their lives with that cute little wave emoji. Isn't she just so cringe? And before anyone says, actually, you're overreacting. That news article is about not teaching gender ideology to kids, not killing all the gays. Here is an official road construction sign in Florida, literally just saying to flat out kill the gays. Even if the person responsible doesn't actually work for the government, as the person is yet to be found, it's still a very blunt statement of conservative policies and goals. And I know some people might not think that some random person posting deleteallgays.exe is all that serious, and to stop them would be a violation of free speech, but that's just not the case. If hate speech is allowed, the normalization of those views occurs. When those views become more popular and normalized, it creates a vicious feedback loop where politicians act on those views. Then those views become even more popular among that politician's voter base, to which the politician passes even more legislation for those views because they see how much the voters like it. Take the DeSantis and Disney situation. When Disney criticized the Don't Say Gay bill DeSantis passed back in early 2022, Ron has been trying to act on the go woke, go broke mentality, and for the past year and a half has been trying to legislate against Disney, which funnily enough always results in a major loss for him. However, now there are Nazis who are actively protesting outside of Disney World with pro-DeSantis signage. Sometimes I hate being right. On the more voter and pundit end of things, you have former Fox News host Tucker Carlson constantly going on every night peddling baseless conspiracies about the wokes, gays, trans, and people of color while dog whistling to white nationalists. Matt Walsh, who we'll talk about in detail later, dog whistling to his racist audience, and a Twitter account that is literally called Blacks Taking L's, who has 72,000 followers, makes nothing but racist content, and if you look at any of the comments, all you'll see are a bunch of racist people jeering at it with either full-on slurs or abbreviations of them. I'm not showing those for obvious reasons. And I just don't know how anyone could make a parody of this outside of just saying these people want to be able to say the N-word again. Except these people literally just say they want to say the N-word again. Oh god. And now it's time to talk about the next conservative desire. No gun regulation! This will probably be the shortest section of the video, mainly because I don't like to spend time thinking about how many children have been gunned down in mass shootings that never should have happened. Because on this channel, just like in real life, thoughts and prayers mean nothing. At the time of writing this script, there have been 291 mass shootings in the US in 2023 alone, and almost 20,000 deaths that are gun-related. And yet conservatives literally don't want to do anything. This is Tennessee Representative Tim Burchett. After the Covenant School shooting, where 3 children and 3 staff had lost their lives, this is what he had to say.
And we're not going to fix it. Criminals are going to be criminals, and my daddy fought in the Second World War, fought in the Pacific, fought the Japanese, and he told me, he said, buddy, he said, if somebody wants to take you out and doesn't mind losing their life, there's not a whole heck of a lot you can do about it.
Do you think there's any role for Congress to play in reaction to this tragedy? Obviously, this is your state now, but
Sure.
It's happened in every other state.
Oh, it's happening. It doesn't matter what state it's happening in. We're all Americans. It doesn't matter the color of their skin. And they all believe red. They're believing a lot. I don't see any real role that we could do other than mess things up, honestly, because of the situation. It's like I said, I don't think a criminal's going to stop from guns. You know, you can print them out on the computer now, 3D printing, and there's really, I don't think you're going to stop the gun violence. I think you've got to change people's hearts.
What should be done to protect people like your little girl from being safe at school?
Well, we homeschool her.
Yep. The Republican Party's solution is to do nothing, and if you're so worried about it, homeschool your kids, you stupid liberal. Even when there's evidence that shows gun restriction laws actually help prevent gun violence, Republicans still don't want to do anything. Remember that Onion article I showed at the start? It's a running joke they post after any mass shooting, but like, a company whose job it is to parody these people can't even do that anymore because the politicians are starting to make the parody their policy. Up until this point, I've been going into detail on every single poll response, but I'm not really gonna delve into the whole 61% of GOP voters who think Trump won in 2020. They're too far gone. He didn't, he had no evidence to prove otherwise, and his supporters launched a failed coup attempt that cost people their lives and almost destroyed our democracy.
I did everything right and they indicted me.
It's a topic that's been investigated thoroughly by many other YouTubers and the government, so I doubt anything I say would change their minds anyways. But now it's time for my favorite part of the video, discussing the 57% of GOP voters who go full mask off and admit they're just looking for someone or something to make liberals angry. Because for conservatives, cruelty is the point.
You should have died in the fucking closet. Fuck you.
Of all the things I have and will discuss, none of it is meant to actually better anyone's lives, just make everyone miserable. There's actually a neat quote by former President Lyndon B. Johnson that perfectly sums this up.
If you can convince the lowest white man he's better than the best colored man, he won't notice you're picking his pocket. Hell, give him somebody to look down on, and he'll empty his pockets for you.
You need to remember this quote all throughout this section. Because when you hear about the policies and positions conservatives have and want, and you ask yourself, why would they want that? It only hurts others. Or, why are they doing this if it actively hurts them too? Remember, that's the point. That's what they want. And listen, I get it to an extent. I like drama too. One of my favorite vices is that I used to watch a ton of Karen videos back when they were still super popular a couple years ago. But there's a big difference between watching Karen freakout videos and voting for candidates that intend to do real-world harm to millions of people that I think goes without saying. To start things off, this is Matt Walsh, a famous conservative pundit working for the Daily Wire and a part-time filmmaker. But don't let that innocent facade fool you. He's also a part-time stochastic terror instigator and self-proclaimed theocratic fascist. Let me explain. Walsh is most well known for being one of the most transphobic people on the planet, even making an entire documentary, air quotes, to try to degrade trans people. As said, being a filmmaker is an innocent facade. Not only that, but because of his inflammatory rhetoric, the Boston Children's Hospital had a bomb threat set against them. Yes, that's right, a children's hospital full of sick, innocent children. His rhetoric is so hateful that I can't even play the clip that led to it on YouTube because my video speaking out against it might get flagged as hate speech. If you're interested in seeing his exact words, I'll leave a link to it in the description. His reasoning for all this hatred? He thinks the LGBTQ community is full of groomers while providing absolutely zero evidence.
Well, the claim that doing the chemical castration drugs or surgery or hormonal intervention, the claim that this prevents suicide or has positive psychological effects down the line is utterly, totally baseless. There are no credible long-term studies that bear that out.
Can you give us a summary of your educational background or your healthcare education experience?
Mr. Walsh, you're recognized.
My experience in healthcare?
Your educational background. I'm just curious. You've testified as to a lot of your own research. So I'm curious for what purpose you do that and what background you have to qualify you to speak to that.
Well, my background that qualifies me to speak to this is that I'm a human being with a brain and common sense, and I have a soul. Also, I did. Now it's true. I didn't go to college, but I did go to school long enough to learn how to read, so I can read the data for myself, and that's exactly what I've done.
And, and you also stated there'd been no studies. Well, I'm sitting here holding a study from the American Academy of Pediatrics from the University of Pittsburgh about the suicidal disparities between transgender and cisgender adults and children. So I think, before you state things, you may need to know all the facts.
Nice argument, Senator. Why don't you back it up with a source?
My source is that I made it the fuck up.
Of course. But you know what we do have evidence of? Him being an absolute creep. First, he used to love talking about the breedability of younger women. I felt gross just saying that.
Fact 3. Girls between the ages of like 17 and 24 is when they're technically most fertile.
Yeah.
Okay? That's biological. That's a fact, all right? I'm just stating facts. That's all I'm doing. Saying that. What I'm saying, though, is that if society was if society was different and that we stopped insisting that you're a kid until you're 25 and we just deal with the reality that at about 16 you're an adult who is mature and can make decisions. You are that at 16. I don't care what anybody says.
And second, he's selling a plushie of his adult head on a diapered baby body with a quote saying, "Matt Walsh wants you to buy this, and he wants your kids to play with it." You know what I think of that?
Call that grooming. Groomers, it's like you're a groomer too. Well, this is the very essence of grooming. I violate my kids' consent all the time.
Like, damn, I didn't know Walsh was Latin for massive hypocrite. But in all seriousness, how are you supposed to parody someone like Matt? He literally decries the LGBTQ community as p***s while he simultaneously grooms kids with ideological children's books and creepy baby dolls of himself. But do you know who isn't a hypocritical creep that sells baby Sona dolls of himself? Me, Axolotl. Needless to say, YouTube is probably going to demonetize this video for obvious reasons, so if you want to support the channel, feel free to stop by my Patreon sometime. And if you're unable to or just don't want to, no worries. Just don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment. Anyways, back to the video. I'm sure this is circulated all across the country already, but I'm gonna bring it up here again anyways. During a government meeting in Florida to discuss transgender healthcare bans, Republican Representative William Barnaby gave a speech decrying the LGBTQ community as mutants and demons. I'll play a bit of it for you now.
X-Men movies for Marvel Comics. It's like we have mutants living among us on planet Earth. And, you know, some people don't like that, but that's a fact. We have people that live among us today on planet Earth that are happy to display themselves as if they were mutants from another planet. This is the planet Earth, where God created men, male, and women, female. I'm a proud Christian, conservative Republican. I'm not on the fence. The Lord rebuke you, Satan, and all of your demons and all of your imps who come and parade before us. That's right, I called you demons and imps who come and parade before us and pretend that you are part of this world.
So you may have already identified a few interesting things about Mr. Barnaby. He's a black Floridian Republican, and he's discriminating against a minority group. I find that interesting because Florida has had, and still has, sundown towns. For those of you who don't know what that is, the Britannica defines a sundown town as
a town that excluded non-white people, most frequently African Americans, from remaining in town after sunset. The methods for enforcing such racial segregation range from episodes of collective violence, such as public lynchings, to ongoing housing discrimination enacted via exclusionary covenants that prevented black people from owning property. The term originated in the numerous signs that were posted at the limits of such towns warning African Americans, "Don't let the sun go down on you."
If Mr. Barnaby ever went to one of these towns today, I don't think they'd care if he's a Republican, only that he's black. I mean, police in Oklahoma were recorded this year saying they wished they could go back to lynching black people.
I'm gonna tell you something. If it was back in the day, would they, like when Alan Marshall take a damn blackjack, whoop their ass, throw them in the cell, I'd run for chair.
Yeah. Well, it's not like that no more.
I know. We'll take them down here on Mud Creek and hang them up with the damn rope.
Yeah.
But you can't do
And
that.
the thing about it is,
they got more rights than we got.
All this makes it especially sad that he used the X-Men to attack the LGBTQ community. The X-Men, a series that has historically been used to tear apart racism, anti-Semitism, homophobia, transphobia, etc. The conflicting sides, the titular X-Men and the Brotherhood of Mutants, are just reformists versus revolutionaries, and while they don't use the same methods, they have the same goal of stopping bigotry. And conservatives know that. It's why Elon Musk JQ'd about George Soros, who's Jewish for those of you unaware, being Magneto. Magneto, who's a Jewish Holocaust survivor, and when he sees the same bigotry popping up elsewhere, he takes action against it. Here's my favorite Magneto moment, narrated by Chris Sansom.
They say history is written by the winners. Let's have a history lesson. Florida, 1958. A young black man named Edgar Myers is tied to a tree, flogged with barbed wire, and subsequently lynched by white supremacists for refusing to leave his suburban home. Wisconsin, 1997. A teenager named Matthew White is suspended from a bridge by 4 members of his high school football team and struck by a passing train. Matthew White is gay His murderers received a suspended jail sentence. 4 days ago, a 12-year-old girl named Sarah Cullen, who has developed a third vestigial arm near her uppermost left rib, is kidnapped by 3 red-blooded American youths and thrown from the back of a moving pickup truck to the chorus of "Have a nice day, Mutie." The child is pronounced dead upon her arrival at the local hospital. Speaking of red blood, let's make this a biology lesson also. Do you know why blood is red? Because it's full of iron. God, please, no. That's not very much iron, roughly 5 grams. Enough to fashion a small nail. Even so, imagine if a mutie had the power to extract all the iron from your blood by literally magnetizing the atoms and drawing them outside your body. That'd be a particularly painful way to die. Oh, go ahead and cry. That's it. Tell me how sorry you are. I'm sorry. So was Sarah. I would imagine she cried as you grinned at her with your rotten teeth and your metal fillings. I would imagine she said, "Please, don't kill me." You had all the power to pull the trigger or spare her life. What would a red-blooded American boy do? Bang.
I know not everyone would agree with the extreme methods here, but I think everyone should agree that Magneto's motivation of combating bigotry is a good thing. And yet Elon Musk JQ'd about George Soros being Magneto as a gotcha moment. JQ, or Jewish Question, is a Nazi conspiracy theory that Jewish people secretly control the world and is named after Hitler's final solution, the Holocaust. It was named after the Holocaust. And I find it absolutely hilarious that Musk is jumping on this bandwagon because, well, one, Elon Musk is literally the second richest person in the world, whereas George Soros is the 365th richest person. 2, Musk inherited much of his wealth by being the son of an emerald mine owner in apartheid South Africa, and I don't think the people working in the mines were there voluntarily. And 3, saving the best for last again, Musk bought one of the world's largest social media platforms and uses it to literally just promote right-wing conspiracies like the one I just showed you every day. Remember how I mentioned Matt Walsh having a very transphobic movie? Not only did Elon signal boost it on his own account, but he also stopped Twitter from flagging it as hate speech. And yet this man wants to have Nazi conspiracies about Jewish people controlling the culture. As I keep saying, you can't make this shit up. On the legislative end of things, you have DeSantis, weird how this guy keeps ending up in this video, passing a law, the Protections of Medical Conscience Act, that allows healthcare providers to deny any service to LGBTQ people. Best case scenario, your doctor cancels your yearly checkup. Worst case, they don't treat you as you go to the ER dying. In Georgia, they've banned giving food and water to people waiting in line to vote because, while you have the right to vote, you don't have one to water and sandwiches, I guess. Now this actually has a more sinister motivation. Cruelty is just an added bonus. See, the majority of the voters this would truly be affecting are people of color who the Republican Party knows will overwhelmingly vote Democrat. By banning the sharing of food and water, the goal is to have less people go out and vote for their political opposition. This isn't new either. Republicans have been trying to ban people of color from voting for over 100 years in one way or another. In their book, How Democracies Die, Stephen Levitsky and Daniel Ziblatt look over how black voters in the South during the post-Civil War era were upending the political landscape until the racist white men in power put a stop to it.
In the 1880 presidential election, estimated black turnout was 65% or higher in northern South Carolina, Tennessee, Texas, and Virginia. At one point, more than 40% of legislators in Louisiana's and South Carolina's lower houses were black. If Democratic elections continued, political scientist V. O. Key observed, it would have been fatal to the status of black belt whites.
Since the newly created 15th Amendment prevented outright voting bans, the white people in power had to get creative. Instead of simply saying, no blacks allowed to vote, they made voting requirements such as poll taxes and literacy tests. Requirements that would primarily affect black voters who had no access to education and were in poverty due to the fact that their families had literally just been slaves. The result, as Levitsky and Ziblatt note, was that
these reform measures effectively killed democracy in the American South. Black turnout in the South fell from 61% in 1880 to just 2% in 1912, locking in white supremacy and single-party rule for nearly a century.
For those of you interested, this is a topic I covered in more detail in my Centrists Aren't Allies video. A link to that should be popping up somewhere around here. But now, in Montana, conservatives have been resorting to banning their political opponents, not just trying to stop voters. Meet Zoe Zephyr, a trans representative who, according to this PBS article, was first silenced by the GOP for telling conservative lawmakers that policies that target trans American access to healthcare will lead to them having blood on their hands. And then, the GOP banned her from the chambers after she protested the silencing. Yet it doesn't even end there, because when conservatives realized that she was sitting outside the chamber to keep working, the wives of some of the Republican legislators showed up early to take that seat in an effort to try and prevent her from working. This remind you of anything?
Corporate needs you to find the differences between this picture and this picture. They're the same picture.
So far, this cruelty has been directed at people of color and LGBTQ people. But there's one demographic I haven't mentioned yet. Can you guess what it is?
Children.
Oh.
That's right. Not even children are safe from conservative cruelty. Money over lives is and always has been the conservative motto. Just listen to Alaskan Republican Dave Eastman say child death is good for the system.
In the case where child abuse is fatal, obviously it's not good for the child, but it's actually a benefit to society because there aren't needed for government services and whatnot over the whole course of that child's life.
Through the chair, can you say that again? Did you say a benefit for society?
Talking dollars. Now you've got
Yes.
a $1.5 million price tag here for victims of fatal child abuse. It gets argued periodically that it's actually a cost savings because that child is not going to need any of those government services that they might otherwise be entitled to receive and need based on growing up in this type of environment.
But Republicans don't just celebrate the death of children, they help to facilitate it even though they claim they're the pro-life party. According to Feeding America, more than 9 million children faced hunger in 2021. And yet conservatives fight tooth and nail about actually getting these kids fed. Back in 2022, 192 House Republicans voted against a bill that would help struggling families get baby formula by increasing the number of types and brands allowed under WIC. For those of you unaware, WIC stands for Women, Infant, and Children and is a fund allocated to families each month in order to help pay for the children and baby food. Of course, this didn't stop Republican Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene from pretending like she cares on Twitter, even though she voted against the bill herself. Fucking LARPer. And remember earlier when I said conservatives, or at the very least, transphobes like Matt Walsh were obsessed over protecting children from groomers and pedophiles? Well, they don't seem to actually care about that. According to an NPR article written by the Associated Press, a report on church child abuse in France has shown that over the past 70 years, around 330,000 children were sexually abused by members of the clergy. But it's not just in France either. In Illinois, according to a New York Times article by Ruth Graham,
a 96-page report found that clergy members and lay religious brothers had abused at least 1,997 children since 1950 in the state's 6 dioceses, including the prominent Archdiocese of Chicago.
But don't worry, the church is working hard to make sure that their sexual misconduct keeps going. See, according to an article from the Salt Lake Tribune written by Michael Rendez and Jason Deeren,
the Arizona Supreme Court has ruled that the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, can refuse to answer questions or turn over documents under a state law that exempts religious officials from having to report child sex abuse if they learn of the crime during a confessional setting.
You know, if someone told me they did something like that, I'd immediately go, what the f***? Before dialing 911, but I guess priests are just built different. So, if the courts are helping abuse against kids to continue, why don't conservative lawmakers seem to care or do anything about this, you might be asking? Well, in states all across the country, conservatives are fighting tooth and nail against laws that would stop child marriage. You heard that right, child marriage. According to a Rolling Stone article by Nikki McCon Ramirez, in West Virginia,
minors 16 and over may obtain a marriage license with parental consent, and children under the age of 16 must obtain an additional waiver from a judge.
That's not protecting children from grooming, especially since grown-ass adults can marry these young children. Ugh. Not only that, but there are many Republican politicians who have been convicted of crimes against children. On screen right now, you'll see the beginning of a very long list someone on Reddit put together. I looked over it, I looked into the evidence, and it's all true. I'll leave a link in the description to every single image, so you can look into it if you're curious, but it's pretty f***ing gross. But that's just modern stuff. Cons have been cruel the entire time. For years they've cut food stamps and welfare, the idea becoming popularized with Reagan's famous welfare queen narrative. A narrative that falsely asserts that black people are the main beneficiaries of welfare and use it for free food in order to afford luxury items. In reality, both then and now, white people are the main beneficiaries of government welfare programs. According to the US Census Bureau, in 2022, white people make up 62.7% of SNAP recipients, 66.5% of WIC recipients, and 73.7% of unemployment benefit recipients. Remember that Lyndon B. Johnson quote from earlier? Conservatives literally fight against their own interests just to satiate their hatred. Hell, conservatives even reveled in the welfare queen narrative right after Hurricane Katrina hit New Orleans. Neil Bortz, a conservative radio host most people probably don't even remember, had this to say about the victims of the hurricane that took over 1,800 lives and displaced millions.
Cries of the downtrodden, my left butt cheek. That wasn't the cries of the downtrodden, that's the cries of the useless, the worthless. New Orleans was a welfare city, a city of parasites, a city of people who could not and had no desire to fend for themselves. You have a hurricane descending on them, and they sit on their fat asses and wait for somebody else to come rescue them. You had a city of parasites and leeches.
That reminds me of someone, but I just can't quite recall the name. I guess we'll never know. And don't even get me started on the Civil Rights era and the Jim Crow South, which, for the record, included the voter restriction laws I mentioned earlier. And those laws are only considered some of the lesser atrocities. There are thousands of examples of conservative cruelty, and we'd be here all year if I went over them all. Now I know that all throughout this video I've shown how conservatism is just a big joke, but it's important to remember something. Jokes can be dangerous, and so is conservatism. So while we should laugh at it, it's also important that we take as many actions as possible to prevent conservatives from gaining or keeping political power. If you're just a regular person like me, the most obvious actions are to vote in primary and general elections while also protesting any and all injustices. But do you want to know the super secret ultimate counter to conservatism? Sharing this video. Thank you all so much for watching, and an especially big thank you to my patrons whose continued support helps me keep making content. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment, and I'll see all you gals, gents, and peeps in the next vid.
So Haji likes to howl, but only when she hears a specific video. What is it, Hodgers? What is it? What was that? That's not a howl. Oh, sing. Sing. Oh, cute little baby. Oh, you're good singing.